All right, ready for a deep dive. Let's talk about Austin, Texas.
We all know Austin, right? Music scene, tech startups, that whole keep Austin weird thing. But what happens when that vibe clashes with some seriously tough questions about crime and justice in the city?
That's where things get really interesting. We're digging into a new report. It's from Texas Watchdog. They're all about, keeping an eye on the powerful and uncovering any sign of corruption.
Right.
And they're saying Austin is like teetering on the edge of chaos because of DA José Garza's progressive policies. Yeah, they don't hold back. They even suggest that Garza's basically a puppet for, get this, George Soros.
Okay, so we're diving into those claims, looking at their evidence, and trying to answer the big question. Is Austin really in crisis mode? This is fascinating because it's not just a local story, This connects to a much bigger national conversation about how criminal justice is done, about reform. We're seeing this whole wave of these progressive prosecutors winning elections all over the U.S. And the way they approach law enforcement, well, it's causing some serious friction, you could say.
Yeah, for sure. And this whole Soros connection is just wild. The report makes a huge deal about how Garza's campaign was given over $1 million from a PAC. And that MAC, heavily backed by Soros. So is this normal in local elections?
It definitely raises some important questions, makes you think. Soros has become a lightning rod, right? He funds these progressive prosecutors, and they often want things like, decriminalizing minor offenses, ending cash bail, and making sure police are held accountable when they mess up. It's gained some real traction with people.
But it's also got people really fired up against it. Yep. Critics say it just leads to more crime, that it weakens law enforcement. So, yeah, I get why people are raising eyebrows about this Soros link, especially in Texas, with its reputation.
Tough on crime, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Garza was always upfront about wanting to reform things during his campaign. He wanted to shake things up, decriminalizing those nonviolent drug offenses, eliminating cash bail for low-level things, a less harsh approach overall.
Yeah.
And the report, they even say that these ideas sound okay, on paper. But then
there's always a but.
And that's where the report takes this hard turn. It's like, these reforms are why crime is up in Austin. They keep bringing up this statistic. Austin's violent crime is now 40% higher than the national average. And they say it's all because Garza took office.
40%. Whoa, that's a scary number. They don't sugarcoat it either. They talk about spikes in robberies, aggravated assaults. And get this, they claim car thefts are out of control. Over 14,700 cases just last year, they say.
And this is where we have to remember something about statistics. Sure. They don't always give you the full picture. This report, they present this data as if it's a done deal. Like, Garza's policies backfired. End of story. But just because two things happen around the same time
doesn't mean one caused the other.
Right. Think of it like this. You bake a cake and it falls flat. Was it the oven temp, the ingredients, how long you mixed it? There are so many possibilities. This report, it's focused on one ingredient, Garza. But what about everything else? They kind of forget about things like, a pandemic's impact on crime everywhere, or the economy, even just people moving in and out of the city.
It's like they want a nice, neat story. But reality's way messier.
Exactly. And that messiness, it gets even more real when we move past just numbers. And look at how all this affects people. How these changes actually play out in the lives of everyday people, both the police and the people of Austin.
It's true. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and the legal stuff, But this report, they want you to remember this isn't just some theory, some abstract debate. This is about real consequences, real people.
Yeah. And they switch things up to show that focusing on this unease they claim is growing within the Austin Police Department. They don't paint a pretty picture.
Yeah.
Officers feeling demoralized, like no one's got their back, even scared to do their jobs because of how Garza does things.
It's like they're saying Garza's whole thing about holding police accountable, especially since those Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, well, it's created this mass exodus from the police department. They even quote this group, the Austin Police Retired Officers Association. They're saying the APD is short 500 officers. Is that even possible?
Whether it's exactly 500 or not, the point is it makes you think, right? Police morale, that matters a lot. If officers feel like they're always walking on eggshells, worried about getting in trouble for every little thing, well, they're not going to be as proactive. Response times could suffer. It's common sense.
Makes sense to me. If you're constantly looking over your shoulder, you're not going to be as focused on protecting people, right?
Exactly. And this is where the report tried to connect the dots. They say this whole morale problem has real consequences. Longer wait times for 911 calls, not as many patrols in areas with a lot of crime. and cases piling up. They're basically saying the everyday people of Austin, their safety is at risk because of this.
And to really drive that point home, they include these personal stories, victims of crime who feel like Garza's system failed them. One that really stuck with me was about this woman, Connie Branham. Her son was murdered, and she felt like the plea deals they were offering, they were just an insult.
It's a classic move, honestly. Tell a story, get people emotionally invested. They want you to connect with these issues, not just see them as numbers on a page, but as things that impact real lives.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Stories like hers, they make you question if these reforms, even if they mean well, are they actually causing more harm than good?
And they don't stop there. They even try to link this whole safety issue to people actually moving away from Austin. They talk about census data showing a drop in population, real estate agents saying people are going to the suburbs because they're scared of crime.
Well, hold on. People are leaving Austin because of this? Doesn't seem right. Isn't Austin still a pretty safe city overall?
That's the thing. You got to look deeper. They're painting a very specific picture, right? One that really highlights the bad stuff about these reforms. To really get what's going on in Austin, we got to zoom out. We need to hear from the people who support how DA Garza is doing things.
Okay, yeah, let's play devil's advocate here. What would Garza's supporters say about all this?
Well, they probably say this report is being selective with its data. Like, they're ignoring anything good that came from Garza's changes.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
For example, there's research that says when you decriminalize things and you give people access to treatment, social services, it can actually reduce drug-related crime. And recidivism, too.
Recidivism, for those who don't know, basically means how likely someone is to commit another crime after they've been released. So they're saying these reforms could actually lead to less crime in the long run because they're addressing the root of the problem.
Exactly. They'd say just locking people up for nonviolent stuff, it doesn't actually make anyone safer. They'd argue focusing on rehabilitation, helping people get back on their feet. That's more effective and more humane. They'd probably also push back on this idea that it's all Garza's fault, that the police department is short-staffed. Many cities are dealing with that. It's competitive out there. Plus, there's more scrutiny on law enforcement these days.
So it's more complicated than the report makes it sound. It's not as simple as reforms equal more crime. There's a lot going on here. We got to consider all of it before we form an opinion. What do you think? Can we really have both reform and keep our community safe? Or are those two things just completely at odds with each other? That's the big question, isn't it? Can you really change the system to make it fairer and still keep people safe? It always seems like it's one or the other, right? Like, we're either tough on crime or we just go soft and everything falls apart.
That's how these complicated issues always get simplified, you know what I mean? They make it black and white. And this report, it wants to draw that straight line. Garza's reforms equal more crime. The message being, be careful with these progressive ideas, they're dangerous. But you deserve better than that, a deeper understanding.
Yeah, for sure. And it's easy to get caught up in that we need more law and order. But what if all those tough on crime policies we used to have, what if those actually made some of the problems we have now even worse? Like, what if keeping people truly safe means we have to totally rethink how the whole justice system works?
That's the heart of the debate. Garza and those other prosecutors, they'd say that real safety comes from fixing the things that cause crime in the first place.
Okay.
Things like, people struggling with poverty, not having opportunities, substance abuse, mental health issues, those kinds of things. They'd say just locking people up without dealing with that stuff. It's like putting a tiny Band-Aid on a huge wound.
So it's about stopping it from happening again, not just punishing someone for doing it once.
Exactly. They'd argue that putting money into these communities, giving people resources, alternatives to jail, that's how you build a system that's fairer and actually makes a difference in crime long term.
That's tough to sell to people, though, right? Especially if they're scared, if they've been a victim, they want solutions now. How do you tell someone who's been through something terrible, we need to be more compassionate, maybe locking this person up for years isn't the answer?
It takes a real change in how we think, We have to admit that what we're doing isn't working. We got to be honest about the tough choices, and yeah, there'll be mistakes along the way, but we can't get stuck on those easy answers, those simple stories.
So, what now? What about Austin? Are they doomed, like this report says, or is there hope for them?
Austin's at a crossroads, just like a lot of cities in the U.S. They're all wrestling with these same things. This report, it's one view, one side of a complicated story, but it's not the end of the story.
It's true. There's always more to uncover.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the big takeaway here is it's on all of us to dig deeper, look at the evidence ourselves, really think about what kind of future we want.
Couldn't agree more. And that means asking some tough questions. Like, what does real justice mean? What are we willing to do to make our communities safe and healthy for everyone? And how do we create a system that actually helps people get back on their feet instead of just trapping them in the same cycle?
Those are questions for all of us, not just Austin. Every city, every community, every single person. So you think about what you've heard today. Don't stop there. Find different points of view, challenge what you think you know, keep asking those tough questions.
Because at the end of the day, if we want a more just world, we all need to be part of the conversation. We have to be informed and ready to have those difficult conversations.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Remember how this report presented one specific view of Austin? Well, what more do you need to know to form your own opinion? What questions would you ask? Keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep.